The ballroom sparkled with grandeur, chandeliers casting golden light across the polished floors and elegantly dressed guests. This was Alexander Whitmore's domain, a playground of power and wealth where his presence alone commanded attention. Among the sea of opulence and laughter, Amelia Harper quietly moved through the crowd, balancing silver trays with grace. She wasn't a guest, merely a waitress, a shadow among the glittering elite. But tonight wasn't just another shift. Alexander's voice boomed across the room, silencing the chatter. His piercing gaze locked onto Amelia, and with a smirk, he issued a challenge. A cruel one meant to humiliate. "Miss Harper, why don't you grace us with a song?" The crowd buzzed with excitement, eager for entertainment at her expense. Amelia froze, her heart pounding as all eyes turned toward her. Little did Alexander know, the stage he forced her onto wouldn't be his triumph. It would become her moment. When humiliation turns to awe and silence gives way to a voice no one expected, the impossible unfolds. This is the story of how courage transforms everything. The gala was a masterpiece of excess. Golden chandeliers, velvet drapes, and laughter that echoed off marble walls. Alexander Whitmore's events were always the talk of the town, a showcase of his influence and wealth. And tonight, as he stood at the center of it all, he basked in the power he so carefully cultivated. Amelia Harper moved through the crowd with practiced grace, a silver tray in her hands and determination in her steps. She blended into the backdrop of wealth, her presence unnoticed by the guests whose conversations rarely dropped below a hum of self-importance. Yet behind her quiet demeanor was a strength born from countless nights just like this. Alexander's sharp gaze swept the room, stopping on Amelia as she passed near the grand piano. A smirk tugged at his lips, a spark of mischief igniting. To him, she was just another insignificant figure in the room, a perfect target for his next move. His voice rang out, smooth and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we've found an unexpected gem among us tonight." The murmurs quieted, and the crowd's attention shifted to Amelia, who froze mid-step. Her heart pounded as Alexander gestured toward her, his smirk deepening. "Miss Harper, perhaps you'd honor us with a song?" Laughter rippled through the room, low and expectant. It wasn't a request, it was a challenge, a power play meant to humiliate. Alexander mistook Amelia's humility for weakness, but he had no idea what strength lay beneath her calm exterior. Across the room, Grace Montgomery, a retired pianist, noticed Amelia's fleeting glances toward the piano earlier in the evening. Grace had spent decades commanding audiences with her music, and she saw something in Amelia, an unspoken spark. Silently, she willed her to rise to the challenge, knowing this moment could be far more than Alexander ever anticipated. The tension thickened as Amelia stood frozen, the weight of the room's eyes pressing down on her. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of courage began to stir. The room buzzed with anticipation as Alexander's voice echoed through the lavish ballroom. "Miss Harper, don't be shy. Surely, someone with such poise must have a voice to match." His words dripped with mockery, triggering waves of laughter that rolled through the crowd. Amelia stood frozen, her tray slipping from her hands as the spotlight landed squarely on her. The laughter, the stares, the whispers. It was a storm of judgment, and she was caught in its center. Her pulse raced, her palms clammy as doubt clawed its way into her mind. Sing? In front of them, the thought felt impossible. Amelia had spent her life blending into the background, avoiding moments like this. Her voice wasn't meant for crowds. It was her sanctuary, a part of herself she rarely shared. But just as the weight of humiliation threatened to crush her, her eyes found Grace Montgomery. The older woman sat with her hands folded, her gaze steady and encouraging. No words were spoken, but Grace's expression said it all. "You're more than they think you are. Show them." Amelia took a shaky breath, her fists clenching at her sides. The mocking laughter faded to a dull roar as a new determination flickered within her. The room's expectations didn't matter, not Alexander's arrogance, not the crowd's ridicule. What mattered was her choice to rise. The crowd quieted as Amelia stepped forward, her legs trembling beneath her, but her chin held high. She reached the stage, the microphone a cold weight in her hands. The audience, once amused, now leaned in with intrigue. With one last glance at Grace, Amelia exhaled slowly. Fear still coursed through her veins, but courage began to thread its way through the cracks. This wasn't Alexander's stage anymore. It was hers. As Amelia took a breath, the room held its collective silence, expecting her failure. But when her voice emerged, soft and delicate, it wasn't the faltering sound of humiliation they expected. It was pure, unyielding. The melody wrapped itself around the audience like a warm embrace. Each note was deliberate, filled with vulnerability yet laced with defiance. It wasn't just a song, it was a story. Amelia sang of struggles unseen, of resilience forged in quiet moments, and of finding strength when the world turns its back. The laughter, the whispers, they vanished. The mocking smirks were replaced by wide eyes and parted lips. The opulence of the ballroom seemed to pale in comparison to the raw power of her voice. Alexander stood frozen, his trademark smirk faltering. This wasn't the spectacle he had envisioned. The crowd wasn't laughing with him. They weren't even looking at him anymore. Every eye was on Amelia, their expressions shifting from surprise to awe. Near the back, Grace smiled through glistening eyes. She knew this was Amelia's moment, not of rebellion, but of reclamation. As the song swelled to its emotional peak, the room was no longer a ballroom of privilege. It was a sanctuary of truth. Alexander, once the master of the evening, now seemed small, a shadow against the radiance of Amelia's defiance. With the final note, Amelia stood tall, her voice lingering in the air like a declaration. She wasn't invisible anymore. The final note hung in the air, delicate yet unbreakable, like a moment frozen in time. Then, as if on cue, the room erupted. Applause thundered through the ballroom, rising like a wave that crashed against every wall. The elite crowd, so poised and guarded moments ago, stood on their feet, their admiration unrestrained. Amelia's voice wasn't just heard. It had pierced through the layers of their privilege, resonating with something deeper. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was unforgettable. In the corner of the room, Alexander stood stiffly, his smile forced, his hands nervously clasped. The crowd he once controlled now celebrated someone else. Every clap was a reminder of his failure, every cheer a declaration of his lost power. Slowly, he tried to blend into the background, but even his shadow seemed irrelevant now. As Amelia stepped off the stage, overwhelmed by the outpouring of admiration, a man approached her. Ethan Blackwell, the renowned producer, extended his hand, his expression one of genuine respect. "Miss Harper," he began, his voice steady. "What I witnessed tonight was extraordinary. You have a gift, one the world deserves to hear. Let me help you share it." Amelia stared at him, her heart racing, not from fear, but from possibility. The spotlight no longer felt like a burden, felt like an invitation. The applause continued, a resounding echo of her courage and a signal that her journey was just beginning. The applause had faded, but the echoes of Amelia's song lingered in every corner of the ballroom. As she stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around her like a quiet victory. By her side, Grace smiled gently, her eyes filled with pride. "Tonight wasn't about them," Grace said softly. "It was about you, proving to yourself that your voice was always enough." Amelia nodded, the weight of Grace's words settling deep within her. This night wasn't about silencing her doubters. It was about discovering her own strength, her worth, and the power of her voice. In the distance, she noticed Alexander slipping out of the ballroom, his once confident stride replaced by a defeated slump. The man who had tried to control the narrative had lost, not to ridicule but to the undeniable truth of her talent. His exit marked the end of his dominance, a shadow fading into irrelevance. Amelia turned away, her focus no longer on the past. She wasn't walking away from something. She was stepping toward something greater, something new. The horizon stretched before her, filled with endless possibilities, her voice now a compass guiding her forward. As the night unfolded, Amelia held Ethan's card, the weight of his offer pressing against her palm. The temptation to dive into a new world was undeniable, but she knew this moment wasn't about rushing forward. She turned to Grace, who stood beside her with a knowing smile. "Not yet," Amelia said softly. "I want to savor this, what we built tonight." Grace nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "Take your time. The right path will reveal itself when you're ready." The two walked side by side, stepping into the cool embrace of the night. The world around them buzzed with life, but within their quiet companionship was a profound stillness. Amelia had found her voice, her strength, and her courage, and she was finally ready to write her own story. The camera pans out as Amelia and Grace disappear into the night, their silhouettes illuminated by the glow of the city lights. If Amelia's journey inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of courage and transformation.